occupation duty in South Pacific. And then she was in the Greek Navy until 1991. So this.
And she here you are referring to the she.
All over, yeah. Ships are always referred to in
She.
female, yeah. And the ship was built in Tampa, Florida, and she was launched and commissioned in 1944, which was towards the end of World War II. And Winston Churchill had begged FDR, who was our president at the time, to create these kinds of ships, specifically destroyer escorts, because of their significance to England, how they protected the supply line, and they really kept England afloat during the war.
So initially the ship was owned by the English.
No, it was American, and it was in the North Atlantic Ocean, and then it was in the South Pacific Ocean on those two fronts, and then it was in the Greek Navy, so the Greeks owned it for 40 years. And this is the only one left of its kind, the only destroyer escort
The only?
left that's floating in America. So it's a very special ship that we have.
Wow.
So what's your step? So this is the galley, it's the kitchen. And
Oh wow.
this is where they would make all of the meals for the 212 men in this little suite. Now we're getting up to the front of the ship.
Yep.
We have 4 cooks and 12 bakers. We use these steam kettles, which were known as poppers, to make soups and stews. And they would take potatoes and put them in here. This is an electric potato peeler. There's a rough material on the inside that took the skin off the potatoes. And down here, we have a dough mixer. And every night from midnight to 6 a.m., the 2 bakers would make 100 loaves of fresh bread, and the smell of the bread would rise through the ventilation. There's 24 of these. They have 30 pounds of TNT in them, and they can be fired off right from here, electrically from a ripple switch. And what you have to do is pull the pins, and then these would go down 15 feet into the water. And the force of that has spun the propellers 6 times, and then they're arced. So if they hit a submarine, they'll explode on impact. So these were a really effective weapon. The 3-inch caliber gun, and it would require 9 people. You would need a gun captain and a radio man. You need a pointer who moves the gun up and down, and a trainer, left and right. And you would need men passing ammunition up from the decks below, and they put them in these lockers. Ammunition into the fuse pot. That's what the ammunition looks like.
Oh.
And yeah, it's pretty heavy, right?
It is. Over there?
Yeah, they'd be in here and also below decks. So they would pass them up. And then the fuse pot, which is this, it sets the altitude for which the ammunition will explode at. It doesn't hit a plane dead on. The shrapnel, the pieces of metal, are what'll do the damage. No. Yep. And then you would pull this down, and that would lock it in. And then you could fire it off. This guy does. With this trigger here. But it sits in here. That's where we keep this is the fuse pot. And this is where you set the altitude for which, like how high it's going to explode at. So that's what this does. And then you move it from in here to in. This is where 9 of the ship's officers would share 2 to a room. So you can see the names of the men that serve here. That means it's 345.
Knock off ship's work.
And so the officers, they would stay in here, and they also had a bathroom. And on a ship, you call a bathroom a head. The Navy has its own lingo, like everything has a different meaning. So this is where all of the officers would stay, and you could see their things. But during wartime, there'd be big boxes in here of all their paperwork and their uniforms, so it wouldn't look as nice as it does. And this is the executive officer's room. He was second in command, so he didn't have to share. He had his own room. And just make sure you notice those wooden boards right here with all the holes in them. These are called fiddle boards, and we're going to talk about them in here. So.
Wow, this is the dining room?
Yeah, this is where only the officers, though, they had their meals here. And they would come in their full uniforms and eat a very formal meal here. But when they were on the ocean, when they were underway, the ship was rocking back and forth, they couldn't eat just like this because everything would slide off the table.
Yeah.
So they put those wooden boards, those fiddle boards, and they had holes for each piece of china, so everything would stay on the table. And this was also an operating table, so when these lights were on here, you'd have to clear the table and a body would go. This one is Captain Marcel Blanc, and he was the captain of the ship. He was from New Orleans. So one of the things everybody notices is the Tabasco sauce, because people from the South are obsessed with Tabasco sauce.
Are you from the south?
No, so
North?
I don't care.
North, east, west? It's okay.
And over here we have a picture of the crew and their wives or their girlfriends over there. And we also have a picture of the man that this ship was named after, and that's Frank Slater. So this type of ship is a destroyer escort. So all destroyer escorts that we had, all 563 of them, were named after sailors or Marines who died in action. So during the war, Frank Slater served on another ship on the USS San Francisco. And in 1942, in the Battle of Guadalcanal, he was trying to take a plane down, and that plane fell on top of him. So he, along with 11 other people, died.
This guy?
Yeah.
So is it like...
So this is where the regular guys, they eat their meals.
this
it's
is
a lot different.
so like a DH. This is a dining room, just a normal
this
dining
is really
room.
like that. They would take a tray, and they walk down the line, and you get served in all of the compartments except for one. So when you went to go sit down at one of these tables here, you put your elbow in here, and you eat like this, so your food didn't slide away from
So that because the ship is rocking.
Yeah. And all of the food was cooked up in the galley where we were. So there were no elevators or anything on the ship. So you had to carry these heavy serving trays down those ladders, which was really hard to do. And you had handleless mugs, so they keep your hands nice and warm in a place like the North Atlantic, where it's really cold.
Yeah.
And the cooks and the bakers, they sleep in these racks here. And every man on the ship had his own bed, so nobody had to share. Nobody had to hot bunk, is what they call it. So if any extra people were on board, they could string up a hammock from one of the hooks on the overheads. And that's where most people would stay. It's called a berthing area, and it's where 25% of the crew stayed. So, and the guys here, they were young. They were 18 to 20 years old. So most of them had never been away from home before, and then they were being put at sea, so they'd get very seasick, very nauseous. So top bunks, people wanted the top bunks. They didn't want to get thrown up on. And also to get up here, you had to climb. So these guys would get stepped on, they'd get thrown up on. And down here you can see a foot locker. This is where you store all your things. And if anybody wanted to get to their stuff at whatever time, they have to lift this guy up. So you really had to go. But the guys on the top didn't have it the best either. So they had a lot of steam pipes was really hot. So really nobody wanted to be in any of these bunks at all, but they had to be because we were at war. And it's good, right? It's called that because all of the men would walk around here getting all the scuttlebutt.
Scuttlebutt.
Yeah. And they would get all the gossip around here, and they would also, the butt is the body where you'd hold the water, so scuttlebutt. Nice. Okay, we're gonna go up. One more. Like if there was an emergency, you can bring it back and forth. It's really loud though, and you can quiet it.
Okay.
So this is the radio room, and it was called Radio Shack back in the day. Like, and there
Radio
is
Shack,
men in
like-
here. Your first man would be at the mill, which is a typewriter, and he would take down all of the messages you hear coming in through Morse code. So all those beeps are actually words and sentences, and they would be written down in groups of letters, all scrambled up so they didn't make sense. So you would have to send them into the coding room, where they would be translated and then sent up to the captain. So very few people knew what these messages were saying for security reasons. Office. This is where the plan of the day would be written. And you'd find people in here writing up paychecks and giving out liberty passes so that the men could go ashore and have some leisure time. And here, this is the captain's cabin, so you can come here so you can say.
It's okay.
And that's where Captain Blanc stayed. He had the largest stateroom on the ship, so it was real nice. And he's the only man on the entire ship. This is the Combat Information Center. This was pretty much the brains of the ship in here. There'd be about 8 to 10 men crammed into this room in their chambray shirts. It was hot, really crowded. And they would be using plotting boards to mark where the people were around them. And how they found out who these people are is with this right here. This is the IFF. It means identification, friend, or foe. so it would send a signal out, say to another ship, and depending upon the response you got back, you could figure out who they were, if they were your friends or your enemies. And how you found out where the people are around you is with your radar systems. You have your SA radar over here. This is the air search radar, so you can see the planes. And this is the gaze scope, which is your range. This is the bearing circle, which is direction. And this is both range and direction. And during the war, technology was progressing very rapidly. So you wouldn't need all of this. You would just have this by the end. And now all of this is in there. Like that. And this is the SL radar. It's your surface radar, so you can look in here. And that's how you can see ships on the water. And also submarines up to about 8 miles away. But
This?
Most of the over here, this is called a dead reckoning tracer. It uses a gyro compass, which is your longitude and latitude where you are, and your speed in knots, which is how fast you're going. So as you're moving, changing speed and location, it plots your course for you. So when you're finished with your journey, you have a whole course map, and it's also helpful.
So like if you be drawing as you move?
Yeah, it actually moves on its own. This is like a computer from World War II.
Uh-huh.
And it'll move with these two machines on its own as you're going fast or changing location. So it's pretty cool. And we have a lot of different ways to communicate in this compartment since it's so important. You have voice tubes, which you just shout into them and they go into a different room. So those are fun. And then you have sound-powered phones, which you can speak to different people, different compartments. They still use them today in the Navy. So this is the pilot house, and this is how you steer the ship. And on a ship, you don't call it a steering wheel, you call it a helm. And as you're standing here, it's pretty hard to see out of these windows, right? They're really small. So in bad weather and in combat, you could shut these. And every night, you would shut the portholes, you would shut them, and you would close the hatches too. Because you didn't want your enemies to see you on the ocean when it was really dark, you didn't want to emit any light. So if you couldn't see, you would have to listen, and up on the flying bridge is the captain, and he shouts down orders to you from the voice tube, who would tell you to look at the...
Like he tells
on the
you
rudder.
maybe turn this, turn that.
Yeah, he would say go however many degrees on the rudder, and then also at your compass. He would tell you to look at your gyro compass. And these both are compasses. This is for true north, and this is for magnetic north. And this is a clinometer, which measures the roll of the ship, or your level of seasickness if you get really bad waves. And this is how you would send a message down to the engine room to change the speed of the ship. It's called an engine order telegraph. And you have the port up here and the whistles on the other signal bridge. And it's how you can send messages under radio silence, so they would never be intercepted. Nobody could ever hear what you were saying. You can use your signal lamp to send messages in Morse code.
Oh.
So that's SOS. That would be save our ship if you needed to send a distress call. Another way to send the messages is with these flags here. All of these flags represent different letters or numbers or meanings. And up here on the starboard side, they say D